Hi guys, Frankie V from Pros and Fan with another long overdue update as to working with power tools. And hopefully we have an interesting subject today. And hopefully we won't go too far off the beaten path because, well, we will be dealing with things that are more about theory than it is about practical application as far as creating a base lighting solution to an environment. So in this case, I have my little test environment here that I consider quite often when Epic makes improvements to lighting features. These emitters, they're not lights, they're emitters because there's no such thing as lights inside a computer. When I applied and add one of these things to the environment as to behavior. Now, the nice thing about Unreal 4, over the years, over the past year at least, has continued to improve. That a lot of the lighting behaviors have a parallel with lighting rendering systems like V-Ray, Metal Ray, and as well as RenderMan. So it's Unreal 4 is really becoming kind of into the position where it's a nice tool to be able to use, especially with the release of Sequencer to do, say, animated feature films. So I would suspect a year from now there's going to be a group of high school team who get together and out of the garage produce a full-length animated feature film that's going to give a company like Pixar a run for their money. Could you imagine going up against Disney? You're up for an Academy Award and it's a bunch of 16-year-olds going up against John Lasseter. That'd be cool. So anyways, we're kind of getting off here. So to put things into a context, what we're going to go after here is something that's a little bit more hyper-extended than you would normally see in, say, in the documentation of applying different variables to in this case, emitter called a point light. Now, there's two general purpose uses of a point light in that it can either behave as a means to illuminate an area, a volume of space in general, versus the requirement of what would be considered a photometric lighting setup, which has, say, real-world mathematical certainty to it. So in this case, if we look at this light here, it is intensity is set to 500 as with a luminance which is more of a luminance value of 1700 lumens corresponds to a 100-watt light bulb. So this value is what, about 250-watt light bulb. So that's the behavior that you can get off of this, and of course you can load it in different types of LUTs or whatever you want that would change the behavior of this HEIS. Sorry, HEIS. Is that it? No, it can't be right. There you are. This here. Is it looking? Go look for LUTs. Yeah, I think it's LUTs at once. It's been a while since I played with that. You can give it your light a real world equivalent behavior. So if you want to use let's say what is it, a fluorescent light, you can apply a value to this that make this automatically behave as a fluorescent light. So it's like, for example, the temperature. If we use temperature, we can change the lighting temperature, change the lighting color to emulate different types of lighting effects. There is also another use to a light emitter in general, particularly in 3ds Max, where the light itself can be exclude shadow and specularity types of effects. So it becomes more of an ambient. It's classified as an ambient fill rather than directly affecting the overall lighting as to things like, for example, shadows, which suggest point source lighting. So how can we increase or decrease the overall lighting balance of a given volume of space as you wish? Now, in 3ds Max, which is the application I know best, you have things like area lights, where you can define an area and say this is an area space of light. That's anything that's within this area light is only what is lit. A light can also be used to include or exclude separate elements within the scene. So you can apply, say, a much more output of a specific object that you want to drag focus to. So which is pretty good, which would be pretty good for doing something inside a game engine. Say, for example, in this room here, we can create an overall tonal light balance that we wish, but over in the corner here, there might be a book, for example, that is critical to the character or the player being able to proceed into the game. So we can create a single point light source, a single point light that pulls focus to that book based on its luminance value. I hope that we can get that understood. But basically what we want to do is convert this light here to a general use. In other words, to use it as a paintbrush for the entire volume of space, and not limited to just a simple procedural or photometric type of lighting element. So in this case, we need to make a couple of conversions. I think I did mention before, first thing we need to do is make sure our world settings is set up with a number of indirect bounces that we need. Now, some say 4 is fine, some will say 50. I go for 100. It's mostly discretionary and something that you need to kind of test to see if it will work out for you. But basically, this will definitely have an effect if we change the behavior of this light to something a bit more mathematical rather than procedure. And how you do that is use inverse squared fall off. Now, if you're familiar with the lighting elements in 3ds Max, this is actually turned off by default, which makes life easier if you just want a base lighting setup, and then tailor the lighting to whatever it is you want using the inverse square fall off and changing intensity levels. But by default in Unreal 4, it's turned on. So if we actually turn it off, we get a totally different lighting behavior, which becomes a multiple or a mathematical value rather than a fixed value as to luminance being 100 watts equals 1700 luminous. So if we want this to be correct as a mathematical multiplier, then we need to change that to 1. And of course, we back to probably pretty close to this being a 200 watt light bulb, but without, as you can see, an inverse square fall off applied to it as far as shadow effect goes. Now this is where we have a little bit of fun. Now, as I mentioned before, the direction we're going here is we're going to hyperinflate the values of this element here to show how it can be used as a big, huge paint roller rather than a finely detailed detailing brush. So we could do that by changing obviously some of the lighting value intensities in here, not in the world settings, because we already have our world setting the one thing that we do need for this purpose of creating indoor lighting of 100 bounces, because we have a lot of walls that we want to bounce. If there's a light outside, 2, 3 would be the max that we really would need, because it wouldn't have any real effect. But since we're going to want to take this light and push its effect throughout the entire environment as a demonstration of let's say, let's call it a max value test, as in, here's how big of a change it can make. How small numbers can change big time. So attenuation radius, we want kind of an infinite value as to our radius. Now, I don't know just yet if turning this to 0 will actually make the volume of space infinite. I'll try it one day, and of course I'll get back to you about it. But for the purpose of the test, this will be fine. Okay, so that's great. So the next thing we want to do, because this is not going to be a point source light, this is going to be a way to be able to fill a volume of space with light. So if we look over here, for example, and we look over here, we can see that there's a lot of shadowy effect that, it can get confusing, because we're more or less generating a light source without really a light source. So we get these really, let's say, phantom shadows that really aren't definable by light coming in through the window. So if we turn off cast shadows, look what we get. We get we start getting a lot more light penetration. Turn that off. So just a trick to keep in mind. You want to add and drive a light source into an area, turn off the shadowing effect, and this is what you get. Now this is where the multiplier effect comes in as far as in the number of bounces, because the indirect lighting intensity, anywhere you see the word indirect lighting, that's usually an indication that this is a multiple of and is directly affected by the number of bounces you can push into this area. So if we have this, this is a pretty big volume of space that we need to penetrate into this, way into these corners back here. So I don't think that light source coming from here, that the number of bounces coming out here is going to hit that wall, bounce, 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 bounce. So 100 bounces is going to pretty well, whatever is emitted off of here as a single photon is going to land up over here in the corner, way up here, and just basically splatter this area with lighting. There should also should be noted there is such thing as called a thing called a force beta. That's where a value is overextended beyond the allowable minimum of a different variable. So sounds hoity-toity technical. That would be, for example, if we set up the radius to be small and increase the lighting, you can see that our volume that this lighting is supposed to cover is very limited as to the amount of volume of space that that's limited by the attenuation radius. I hope that makes sense. So let's turn down that intensity to 1. And we're going to turn this up to attenuation to maximum. I don't think 0 is going to cut it. Nope, see, it doesn't work. Too bad. 3,000. Okay, boom. Okay, back on plan here. Okay, so just be aware of that in all probability, once this is compiled, we will be seeing some unusual lighting artifacts that are popping up, but most of that is like this area in here, which is actually a problem with the asset itself, which I have never really got around to fixing as far as smoothing groups go. It could also be some really weird stuff going on with the materials. I don't know. Anyways, moving on, you can see that we have some hyper valued numbers plugged in that are actually small. So we got 1 here as far as intensity goes. We have cast shadows turned off. Ooh, this is the one we want to play with right now. We want to play with indirect lighting intensity, which is what we're going ahead in the direction we were heading when I got kind of diverted. Sorry, I tend to do that. As far as the multiplier for our number of bounces. So our anything that says lighting in indirect lighting would be an effect that as an intensity or a value shift change as our emitter is coming off the wall as a bounce. Okay, so we should see a rather intense difference if we go with a value of a 3. I don't think that's going to make any changes here until we recompile the lighting, of course. But now, what do we have? One last little note here. If we turn off min roughness, that's going to prevent, of course, the surface from creating any kind of specularity, which we want to introduce by individual lighting components to build up on the lighting later. But once again, we're going with hyper numbers. So indirect lighting intensity is set to 3. We set the min roughness to 1, which is basically roughness, which is specularity turned off. I hate that. They kind of got things backwards. It's kind of like, driving on the wrong side of the road kind of thing. Not that anybody in the world actually does that, of course. Okay, so indirect lighting intensity is set to 3, meaning that whatever that went off the 100 bounces that comes off the wall, it's going to increase the base intensity of 1 by 3, a factor of 3. So we should get and a more or less infinite radius. That more or less, okay, cast shadows turned off, that more or less gives us a working lighting solution. So, okay, moving forward, don't want to spend too much time dwelling on stuff. Okay. Let's see, where are we? There we go, point light. Where am I? Okay. So we know that's changed, so what we get before we make those changes, and if we were just to do a base lighting setup, we would get this. But with those changes, as compiled, you see we got that would be what the light would be rendered as. We had dragged it in, and with those changes made, we would get this. Okay, as you can see, we have light penetration over here, and of course there's the artifacts I was talking about, which, as I mentioned, is problematic of the asset. Not that is that actually lit? Yeah, it is lit. It's almost maybe too close to being unlit. So let's see, if we go to lit and we go to unlit, unlit of course is a bit brighter, I guess. Lit is more toned down because now we have shadowing going on. But if we look at our light, intensity 1, attenuation radius set to max, cast shadows turned off, indirect lighting intensity 3. So just on that one light, that one lighting element, excluding the sunlight, if we just take the sunlight out of here, I should do a test on that too as well. If we take the sunlight out of here, then this is what the result will be, just based off of that one light. You know, and an infinite volume of space that this light can be bounced around with based on a set level. So with the shadowing turned off, you can see how the difference that having the shadow turned on, would make. We could probably recompile this and get this type of difference in the lighting balance overall, but with the cast shadow turned off, we got a really nice base working fill. And if we want, we can put in a post-processing volume to either increase or decrease the amount of light, and then we can put in point lights with shadowing turned on. Turn down the intensity. You can see how we can have a lot better control over shadowing. Or, if we have that book stand over here, something in the corner, we want to either increase the attenuation. Now we're just playing around. Source radius. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Anyways, just the whole point of this thing was to show you how you can take a photometric light, make a few changes to it, and then it becomes generally a paint roller that you can have a lot easier time controlling the overall volume of the lighting effect through a much broader area than normally. What I see is somebody putting a whole, they have a room full of a dozen lights, and all you see is red X's all over the place. Okay, we'll call this one done. I'm happy with it. See ya.